Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Saving Parker, a Forever Home novel, by Dan Walsh, narrated by Hilary Huber. 1. What was going on? All this yelling and banging, strangers running across the yard, cars making loud noises and lights flashing. Parker ran and hid as far back in the shed as he could. It was a dark crawl space under a roof made of rusty sheet metal, perched above a wall of old tires. He wanted no part of whatever was going on out there. He curled up in a tight ball and lay there, trembling. Not all his tension came from the strange goings-on. Some came from restraining himself from doing the one thing he wanted to do most, to bark at the top of his lungs at these invaders who'd come onto their property. 4 men, all dressed alike. What were they doing here? They had no right. As soon as they'd arrived, he could tell they weren't here on friendly terms. But Parker didn't bark. He didn't dare make a sound. His mouth still stung from a kick he'd gotten that morning. The man hated it whenever Parker barked. Felt like the man hated everything Parker did. There was no pleasing him, no matter how hard Parker tried. Barking was clearly the worst thing. But how could Parker stop doing something so essential to his main purpose? He existed to serve and protect this property, this owner, even if the effort was unappreciated. The need to bark came from deep within, beyond his reach. Another loud bang. More yelling. "Come out, Alfredo. Do it now. Hands over your head where we can see them." Another voice. "If we have to come in there, we will shoot you." "Don't shoot. I'm coming out. Jeez, what's wrong with you people? I didn't do nothing. I don't even have a gun in here." Parker didn't understand most of what was just said, but he did understand Alfredo. That's what people called the man, and he recognized the man's voice. But this was the first time Parker had ever sensed fear in his voice. What was going on? Who were these people? Why were they yelling at the man? "That's right, Alfredo. Keep walking. Hands up. Walk straight to me. A few more steps. Stop right there. Now get on the ground. Face first. Arms and legs spread out. That's right. Just like that. Calm down, man. You don't need to point your gun at me. I'm cooperating." More noises. Feet shuffling in the dirt, clicking metal. Then the man yelled out in pain. "Come on, man, you're hurting me. Get your knee out of my back." Grunting and groaning. "Jeez, would you get off me?" "We're almost done. All right, on your feet. You got anything in your pockets? Any weapons? Anything sharp like a knife or needle?" "No, man, my pockets are empty. See for yourself." "I will." Parker was starting to cook in his stuffy hiding spot. It was hot everywhere in Florida these days, but back here it was stifling. No breeze, just non-stop humidity and the glaring afternoon sun beating down on the metal roof. He started to pant. He had to get some water. But where? The metal bowl was empty. Had been all day. Yesterday, his last 3 gulps were disgusting. Warm, stale, debris floating on the surface. Dirt on the bottom, almost undrinkable. He hadn't eaten anything today either, or yesterday. "You guys are making a mistake, I'm telling you. You got the wrong house." "I don't think so. You sold 2 bottles of fentanyl to an undercover officer yesterday. I'm sure the guys searching the house will find plenty more." "Where is this officer?" "I don't see him. I'm telling you, you picked the wrong house." No, we didn't. We got you on video doing the deal. Listen, Alfredo, we read you your rights. I suggest you exercise your right to silence and shut up." A car door opened. "Get in." The door closed. He listened some more. He didn't hear the man anymore. Were they leaving? Were they taking him somewhere? Officer Ned Barringer of the Somerville PD felt relieved. The suspect now safely situated in Jeb Hodgen's patrol car. That went way easier than I expected. During the briefing that morning, they'd been warned the suspect should be considered armed and dangerous. "Yeah," Jeb said. "He didn't even try to put up a fight. I watched the video from yesterday, so I was expecting a very bad dude. This guy's a marshmallow. You see the fear in his eyes when you put those cuffs on? He's acting like he's never been arrested before." "Maybe he hasn't," Ned said. "Or maybe he's been watching the news and heard about the string of fentanyl ODs this past month. He knows those deaths can be tied to what he's selling in that house. You know of any other houses selling this stuff around here?" Jeb shook his head. "Me either." Ned looked the house and property over, from one side to the other. It was an older neighborhood. Many of the homes needed serious repair, but this one was in a league by itself. "What a dump. I can't understand how anyone can live like this." "Yeah, I was glad to get out of there." Jeb pointed to the front door. "Smells like something died in there. You go into the kitchen?" Ned nodded. "About gagged me. Alfredo's a pig." "That's something I don't get. Doesn't his nose work? How's he put up with it every day? He's been making a fortune selling this stuff. Why doesn't he hire someone to keep the place up?" "I know," Ned said. He looked at the front door. "You watch him a minute? I want to talk to the guys inside. See how they're making out." "Sure," Jeb said. "It'll give me time for a smoke." Ned headed across the weed-filled front yard. Just as he reached the cement slab by the doorway, the door opened. Out walked Detective Jason Strand, a big smile on his face, holding up a large baggie filled with bluish-gray pills. "Is that it?" Ned asked. "The mother lode," Strand said, "and these are an exact match to the ones we nabbed yesterday in the undercover operation. I'm 99% sure they're going to match up with the overdoses we've been having lately." Strand put the bag of pills into a larger evidence bag. "So, you guys done in here?" "We are, for now." He started walking toward his car. "This should be enough to shut this guy down for good. He'll be going away for a long time." "Good. My partner should be right behind me." "I'll wait and lock up," Ned said. "Then we'll get this guy downtown and booked." Still tucked deep inside his cubbyhole, Parker sat up and listened. He could hear two men talking in the front, but neither was the man. He hadn't heard his voice for several minutes. Was it safe to come out? How would these strangers treat him? He barely understood a single word, but their tones didn't sound friendly. What if he came out and they treated him as badly as the man did, or worse? He was so hot and so thirsty, but an overpowering fear held him in place. He'd better just wait until he was absolutely sure the coast was clear. Hopefully, it wouldn't be too much longer. 2. "Wait! Don't leave yet!" Ned looked up, searching for the woman behind the screaming voice. He saw her trotting across the street, waving at him furiously. She looked to be in her 50s, way too bright red hair. "You taking that man away? That drug dealer?" "Yes, we are." "Finally. But you gonna let him out again like last time?" "Nope, not this time. There's a good chance he won't ever be back." "Good. I'm glad. But if that's the case, you can't leave yet." "Why not?" She looked over at Alfredo sitting in the back seat of Jeb's patrol car. "Can he hear me?" Ned wanted to say the people 3 streets over could probably hear her. "I don't know. Why don't you come over here to my car and talk a little quieter, just to be safe?" She did. "So why can't we leave just yet?" "Because someone's got to do something about the dog." "What dog?" "The little dog." She looked toward the left side of the house. "See that old rickety shed in the back, surrounded by all that crap? I think he's in there. I haven't seen him all day, but that's usually where he hides." "There's no fence back there," Ned said. "How do you know he hasn't run off?" "I wish he could run off. He'd be better off anywhere else than here. The way that man treats him is a crime, but the poor thing's always chained up. If you go back there, you'll see what I mean." Ned tried to see where she was pointing. The backyard looked more like a junkyard, no lawn at all, trash and garbage everywhere. Besides that, this was the hottest part of the day, and that shed had a metal roof. I don't understand how an animal could even survive in there. It must be over 100 degrees. I know. Isn't it awful? He never lets him inside, whether it's boiling out or freezing in the winter. You should see the poor thing. His hair's all full of mats. His coat's a mess. I'm sure he's probably got a ton of fleas, and who knows what else. I've wanted to say something 1,000 times, but he's such an angry little man. And you know how drug dealers are. See him all the time on TV shows. I was afraid he might shoot me. Have you ever tried calling animal control? You can do it anonymously, I think. I've thought about doing that 1,000 times, too, but I was afraid he'd still know it was me. He caught me one time trying to give the dog some water, and you should have heard the tirade of profanities he threw at me. He ran at me and literally chased me off his lawn. What a coward, Ned thought. Well, he won't be bothering you anymore. Let me talk to my partner a sec, and I'll go take a look. Can you stay for a minute? It might go better if the dog sees someone he knows. I don't mind staying if you're here, but I'm not sure it's going to make a difference, me being here or not. It's not like he knows me. I'm not sure I've ever even got to pet the little guy. Well, wait here. I'll be right back. Ned headed over to Jeb's patrol car. He was leaning on the hood, writing something. Hey, Jeb, you think you can take Alfredo in without me? Looks like I've got another situation to handle here. Sure, what's up? Ned talked a little softer. See that redhead over there? Looks like old Alfredo here's a dog abuser, besides everything else. She said he keeps it locked up on a chain in a shed behind the house. I'm going to take a look, maybe get animal control involved. Sure thing, Ned, but don't get too close to it. A dog abuser is usually a dog neglector, too. Probably hasn't had any shots in a while. I'll be careful. Ned headed back to the redhead, who was now walking toward the backyard. She stopped to allow him to catch up. Ned reached out his hand. I'm Officer Ned Barringer, by the way. What's your name? She shook it. My name's Betty. Do I have to give you my full name? Ned laughed. Sometimes people were so overly cautious with cops. No, not if you don't want to. But I was hoping you might be willing to talk to the animal control officer when she gets here, since you've been observing the situation for some time. If things are as bad as you say, they might want to add animal cruelty to the list of Alfredo's crimes. Will I have to testify in court? I don't know. Probably not. But really, you don't have to be afraid of this guy anymore. With the amount of drugs we just seized from that house, he's looking at least 20 to life. We've had 3 overdose deaths in the last month. Pretty sure those deaths will connect back to this house. Oh, my. Well, thanks for explaining that, officer. I feel better now. My name's Betty Crocker, by the way. And before you say another thing, I'm not joking. That's my real name, but I'm a terrible cook. That's another reason I didn't want to give it out. Once people hear it, they never forget it. Well, Betty, let's go take a look at this little dog. You know his name? They started walking toward the shed. His name's Parker. I don't think he even had a name before the little boy came, except maybe Stupid Dog. The little boy's the one called him Parker. Not sure why. Little boy? Yeah. About 6 months ago, there was a young woman living here with Alfredo. She had a son. I forget his name, but he really loved that dog. You're not going to believe what Parker looks like now, compared to what he looked like back then, back when the little boy looked after him. It was the cutest thing. What happened to them? Toward the end, I could hear yelling and screaming almost every night. It went on for weeks. Then one night, I was looking out my window, and I watched Alfredo drive off. A few minutes later, I saw the woman hurrying her son into their car, carrying a suitcase. I opened my window a crack. It was begging her to let them take Parker with them. She said she wanted to, but he wasn't their dog, and she was afraid Alfredo would come after them if they took him. The boys started crying. They drove off, and I haven't seen them since. Parker's ears perked right up. Shortly after a car had driven off, 2 people started walking this way. He heard a man and a woman's voice. He didn't recognize either one, but their tone wasn't angry or unpleasant. The most surprising thing was, he was almost certain he heard the woman say his name. Only the boy ever called him that. It was the only thing the woman said that he did understand. Slowly, he started to get up and crawl forward toward the opening. He wanted to see who they were, see if he could tell what kind of people they were. Maybe they were nice. Maybe they would get him something to drink. He felt so thirsty. He barely had the strength to keep moving forward, but he forced himself to keep going. He had to see who they were. 3. Remembering Jeb's warning about the dog not being up on his shots, Ned approached the old shed with extreme caution. "I don't think he bites," Betty said, coming up behind him. "He's mostly pretty skittish and shy. If he's out of that shed and people walk by, he doesn't bark or growl. Mostly, he runs and hides." "That may be," Ned said, "but how many of them have gotten this close and gotten in his space?" "That's a good point. People mostly just keep walking on by. But still, I think he's harmless for the most part." "Well, I saw a training video about what people go through if they've been bitten by a dog with rabies. I'm not taking any chances." "Fine by me," Betty said. Ned approached slowly, keeping his body sideways as he came closer. He'd been told this was less threatening body language for a dog. When he heard some movement, he stopped. But so did the dog. "Parker," he said in a calm voice. "Are you in there, boy?" He took a few more steps forward. "Parker? Here, boy." There was no response, not even a sound. He saw the chain now, leading from a metal stake into this little dark hole behind some tires. When he got still closer, Ned noticed an empty metal bowl off to the right. He got angry. It was the hottest part of the day. Poor dog. "It's so filthy," Betty said. He also noticed the foul odor coming from the shed. The whole back area smelled bad, but it was especially strong here. "Let's try a different approach." He picked up the metal bowl and backed away from the opening. Looking toward Betty, he said, "How about I clean this up and fill it with fresh water? Would you have a snack of any kind?" "You mean like a dog biscuit?" "Yeah, or anything would do, especially if it had some meat or cheese, like a hot dog. Have any hot dogs?" "I think maybe I do. Want me to go cut up one?" "That would be great. Do you mind?" "Not at all. I'll be right back." Betty hurried across the yard toward her house. Ned brought the metal bowl over to the front corner of the house, where he'd seen a garden hose rolled up by some bushes. After turning the hose on, he let the water run a minute or two to let all the hot water out. Then, looking at the condition of the hose, he decided to turn it off and unscrew it from the faucet. It was probably filled with 1,000 different kinds of bacteria. He rinsed the bowl out and cleaned it with his hand as best he could, then carefully walked the bowl of fresh water back to the opening in the shed and set it down. Betty was heading back this way, smiling, holding a little baggie. "I got them. All I had was chicken dogs, which taste terrible, you ask me." "I don't think a dog will mind," Ned said. "Can you hand me a few pieces?" She did. "Parker, hey boy, look what we've got here. Water? You thirsty? Here's some water." Ned swished his fingers around in the bowl, making some noise. "And food. Are you hungry? Want something to eat?" He rolled a piece of hot dog into the dark opening. He had no idea how far back it went. Betty crouched down beside him. "Here, Parker. You can come out now, boy. It's totally safe. Come and get something to drink." She looked at Ned. "Try throwing in another piece." He did. Then they waited, listening for any sounds. Parker was torn. This man and woman were talking so nice, nicer than anyone had in such a long time. But how could he know for sure they were safe? They came closer, then went away, and now they were back. Then Parker heard a word he recognized. Water. Then the sound of water swishing around. A moment later, something came rolling toward him. What was it? He sniffed the air until he picked up its scent. He wasn't sure. Some kind of food. Was it meat? At this point, he would eat anything. But he was even more interested in the water. Then something else rolled toward him. Another piece of the same kind of food. They called his name several times and always sounded friendly. He decided to take a chance. Crawling slowly forward, he gobbled up the 2 pieces of food. Meat, or something close. They tasted so good. He continued a few more steps, now aware of the sharp pain in his back leg. A memory flash, the man throwing a can at him, half full, yelling for him to shut up. "I hear movement," Ned said. "Sounds like he's coming this way." "Throw in another piece of hot dog," Betty said. Ned did, only this time not as far. Then he tossed another one an even shorter distance. "Come on, boy. It's okay. We won't hurt you." He swished his fingers around in the water again. This time he tossed some drops into the opening. That seemed to do the trick. The dog was coming closer, though they still couldn't see him yet. Ned tossed some more water drops in his direction. Parker came close enough to see his front paws and head. Ned could hardly believe what he was seeing. You could make out his mouth and nose, but the hair on the top of his head and around his ears was covered with mats. One eye was almost closed due to some infection, and the hair on the middle part of his left leg was almost completely gone. He stopped moving. Ned could see he was trembling. "Look at the poor thing," Betty said. "I hardly recognize him. What has he done to you, boy?" "Let's try this." Ned lifted the water bowl up and carefully placed it as far into the opening as he could. Immediately, Parker got up and began to drink. And drink, and drink, and drink. Parker coughed and choked a little and stopped. Sadly, now Ned could tell where the smell came from. It was the dog. Ned slowly reached for the bag of hot dog pieces. As soon as he put them down, Parker gobbled them up and backed away. "Did you see his back leg?" Ned asked. "He's limping." When he drank, they had been able to see one side of his coat. Like the front paw, much of the hair was missing, and he had little scabs all over his body. "This dog's in bad shape." "He really is," Betty said. "That Alfredo's a real devil. Why would anyone ever treat an innocent animal like this? I can't believe the condition Parker's in. You should have seen him back when the little boy was here. I'm telling you, he was a gorgeous little dog, and so happy. It's like I'm looking at a totally different dog now." "Well, there's no doubt," Ned said. "This is one of the worst cases of animal cruelty I've seen. I'm definitely calling animal control." Betty's expression changed. "What do you think they'll do to him? I mean, the dog." "Do to him? I suppose they'll rescue him from this horrible life, bring him to a shelter where they can fix him up, maybe get him adopted in a good home." The look on Betty's face became more serious. "You don't know how these things work, do you? I've done some volunteering down at the Humane Society. That's probably the shelter where they'd bring him. A dog like this, that looks like this? Don't get me wrong. There's some wonderful people down there working hard to try to find dogs new homes, but these situations don't always have happy endings." "What do you mean?" "For one thing, they can't find homes for all the dogs that come in. There's just too many of them, and they don't have unlimited space or resources. One of the staff people explained it to me. They always do their best, but some of the dogs don't make it." "You mean they get put down?" Betty nodded. "Sometimes. They do everything they can to avoid it, but sometimes they have no choice. It breaks their heart when it happens. The lady who explained it to me got all teary as she talked. I did too. But I'm telling you, they bring Parker down there looking like this, there's a chance he won't make it. A pretty good one, I'd say." Ned was a cop. He knew how the world worked. Sometimes life wasn't fair. Sometimes it was even cruel. But he just couldn't see this poor little dog, after all these months of being bullied and abused by this jerk, being brought down to a shelter all alone, just to be put to sleep. It struck a chord deep inside. "We've got to do something, because I'm not okay with that." "Me either," Betty said. "But what can we do?" The look on her face changed again. She was smiling. "I just got an idea. Don't call that animal control officer yet. Wait here with Parker. I'll be right back." Ned watched as she all but ran across the street toward her house. 4. As Ned waited for Betty to return, he got down a little lower on the ground, put several hot dog pieces in his hand, and slowly extended it toward Parker. "Are you hungry, boy?" he said softly. Still tucked far back in the cubbyhole, Parker lifted his head and looked at Ned, then at what was in his hand. He did this several times, his nose twitching all the while, but he didn't move. "I'm not going to hurt you, buddy, I promise. We're here to make everything all better. We're going to get you out of here, get you all cleaned up and put back together." Parker just stared at him, cocked his head once as if trying to comprehend. "I get why you're afraid of people. After what you've been through, I would be too. I'll just leave these here. You can eat them when you're ready." He dumped the hot dog pieces on the pavement, pulled his arm back to give the dog some space. Ned heard something over his shoulder and turned in time to see Betty trotting across the street toward him. She held something in her hand, looked like a postcard. "It took me a few minutes to find it, but here it is." She held the card up as she stepped onto the sidewalk, then headed right toward him. "You're not going to believe this when you see it." Ned quietly backed away from the opening. She handed him what he clearly now saw to be a photograph. He instantly recognized the place, very close to where he was standing. In the center was a nice-looking mixed-breed dog of medium size, standing on a concrete slab. He was chained and looked forward with a concerned expression. His coat was brown and tan. "Wait, is this—" "Parker?" Betty said. "Yes, that's what he used to look like, back when the little boy took care of him." Ned looked back at the pitiful creature, as much as he could see, then at the picture, back and forth, several times. "I would never have guessed this is the same dog." "Makes a very good argument for animal cruelty, doesn't it? All by itself." "It certainly does. The dog in this picture, other than looking a little worried, is really cute." "Cute? He's adorable." "Okay," Ned said, "adorable. The point is," he held up the picture, "I could easily see this dog being someone's best friend." Ned bent down and looked at Parker again. How could someone treat this dog so bad that in a few months' time he winds up looking like that? I definitely think we can use this as evidence against Alfredo. It's even date-stamped. Do you mind if I ask, why did you take this picture? It seems like you were pretty nervous being anywhere near the dog, because of how Alfredo acted." "Oh, I definitely was afraid. I took it one day after I'd seen him drive off. It was just after the mom and little boy left. My sister had been talking about wanting a dog, so I thought maybe she might like to adopt Parker. So I ran over here and took this pic, so she could see what he looked like. I was thinking, if she wanted him, I'd work up the nerve to talk to Alfredo about it." "I'm guessing she didn't want him. Or did Alfredo turn you down?" "She thought he was cute, but it turned out I misunderstood her. She wasn't saying she was actively looking for a dog, just that she wanted one. The apartment she was living at didn't even allow them, so nothing came of it. But then, when you and I were talking about what might happen to Parker if he got taken to the shelter, I remembered it. I wasn't really thinking so much about it being evidence against Alfredo. I was thinking you could show it to that animal control officer so she'd be able to see the kind of dog he really is, underneath all that mess." "I think that's a good idea. I will show it to her, and maybe get it to the folks at the Humane Society, so they can see what kind of dog Parker really is, too. Or at least could be. Maybe then they'll be willing to invest the time to patch him up." "That gives me an idea," Betty said. I'll be right back. Where are you going? To get my phone. We need to...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?